Hi there, this is Dan with 123Muse, and in this video we're going to take another step further with Adobe's all-new project Felix. So in my last videos, if you take a look at them, I have gone through what Project Felix is for, the basics of how to get around the interface, and then some basics of utilizing Project Felix, and then some a little more advanced tricks of how to bring models in from outside of Adobe and texture them up. And now in this video, we are going to bring Project Felix into a small design workflow. In this, we're going to be working on a client project. The client is a owner of a coffee shop, and they have just rebranded their coffee shop and their business. And they want to use that rebranding for some new marketing. So they want to use it for some web marketing and social media marketing. So we're going to go ahead and use Project Felix to create some basically photorealistic. So we're going to use Project Felix to create some photorealistic images that they can use across the board in their advertising and marketing. But by doing it in Project Felix, we're going to then end up with something that we can use in the future for their further marketing, for whatever their future marketing projects might be. And we'll take a look at how we'll do that. So first of all, we're going to go into Project Felix, and I've got it open here. I'm going to create a new project, and then I'm going to maximize that in the screen. Then I'm going to bring in the background image. So let's assume that this background image could be a photo that we've taken at the coffee shop. It could be just as this one is from Adobe Stock, and just an image to kind of show off what we want. And what we're going to do is put the new branding onto a coffee mug and make it look like it's in this coffee shop. Okay, so now we have brought this background image in, and we can see over to the right here that we don't have the align view to image set up. So Felix hasn't been able to figure out where to align our ground plane. So we're going to go ahead and do that manually. So I'm going to, and of course I could change this in the future, but I'm going to just do a basic alignment, and I'm aligning it to this, what I'm assuming is either a little table or a shelf at the bottom of the screen, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now that that is done, I'm going to create a light from my background image. So we've gone ahead and done that. And now if I went over to my scene panel and took a look in my scene, I can see that my background light is there. And here's my background image. So now we want to bring in our coffee mug. And I've got this coffee mug from Adobe Stock. And inside the 3D section, there's a couple of good coffee cups. See over here that we've got we've got kind of like a travel mug and a throwaway mug, recyclable mug, I should say. So I'm going to use the recyclable mug and click on that, and this should drop it in the center of my scene. All right, so now I've got the mug in the center of my scene. I want to just move it around a little because it's not quite in the right place. So to do that, I'm using my model moving tools, which are the tools over on the left-hand side. And to get that into place, and then I'm going to expand it a little. And just a little hint on what these expansion things do. And we talked about it before, but when I click on the scale tool, this is the scale options that I'm given. If I click and hold over one of the axes, I will scale this in that one particular axis. If I click and hold over one of these lines that you're seeing right here, it will scale it on these two axes. But if I click and hold in the center here, I'll scale on the 3 axes. And I find the majority of time that's how I'm wanting to scale it, is on all 3 axes, so that I increase my model equally on all sides. So that's made it big enough, but of course I can see that it has melded with the tabletop. So I'm going to move it up. And what I found, if we take a look here in our preview, I'm going to maximize my preview. You can see here that the cup right now is looking like it's hovering slightly. Well, we don't want that. However, if we drop it completely to the ground, so up here, we see this y-axis position is at 0.3. So if I put 0 in that, and that will place it right on top of the tabletop surface. Now I'm going to maximize my preview again, and we can see that that looks pretty good. But you see at the bottom here, we're not really getting any shadow at all at the bottom, tiny little bit, but want a little bit more just to make it look a little more realistic. So what I found is if I just raise this by 1 point, so I'm going to put 0.1 in that. Now I just get a little bit more of a shadow right next to the bottom of the cup. So it just adds a little bit more realism. Okay, so now we've got our cup, and our cup is in the right place, and we need to add our texture to it. So let's open up our cup. So we'll go and take a look over here inside our cup model, inside our scene panel. And we've got 2 parts to our cup. We've got the lid, coffee cup with lid, and coffee cup with lid cup. And if I open these out, I have the materials for each one of them. So let's take a look at those materials. So my lid material, I have just got a basic material here. It's got some roughness. It doesn't have any metallicness, so it's making it look a little bit like plastic. And my cup, I have got kind of a cardboard look to it. So they've got an image inside the texture browser here, and they've got an image inside the normal browser. So this image makes gives the cardboard texture, and this one gives the detail of that cardboard texture, but we want to change that. So let's take a look at what we're going to do to change that. Now I'm going to open up this, and Chris has made me a cup texture, and here's the PSD for it. I'll open it up. So we would assume that this is the branding that has been created for this new business, and we want to put it on, wrap it around the cup. So we'll take a look at this, and here we go. It's really nice looking branding, and this would make that coffee cup look a lot nicer. So let me just see what happens. So if I was to go ahead and export this as a JPEG, and it's called cup texture, and that's fine. And I'm going to quit Photoshop. I can already hear the fan going on my Mac, so I'm going to keep as few programs open as possible. And let's go back to Felix. So now let's add that texture to the cup and see what happens. So I'm going over here to my base texture, and if I don't have my browser section opened, I can just click it, and here I can browse to my texture. Let me zoom out. Let's go to that cup texture. And we do have a cup texture here, but as you can see, let me select that cup and select the rotate tool. As you can see, it's just not fitting right. It's even when I rotate it, I don't have the logo part of it, and it's very large, so it's not fitting on that texture. So how would we do that? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at how we would get the texture that we want to fit in the way we want on this cup. So what I am going to do is I will save this the way it is. So let's save, and we'll save this to the top called coffee cup. And we're going to do a little bit of work in Photoshop now. So I'm saving this out so I can close Felix down. Okay, that's done. And what I find is pretty handy as well, I have got this app called CleanMyMac. And see in this section right here, it shows me how much RAM I've got free. And when Felix is running, this kind of drops down quite a lot. And I've got 8 gigs on my computer, which is not too bad, but this really drops down when I'm using Felix. So if it does, this is a cool program. I can once I've closed Felix, I can free up some memory. Even with Felix open, I can free up some memory, and it does help a little bit to speed it up. Things get loaded back into its RAM memory then, but sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to get the model of that chair. So to do that, I downloaded it from Adobe Stock. So we'll go into Adobe Stock. In Adobe Stock, I'm going to go to 3D, go to 3D Models. Okay, so I'm looking for my coffee cup, and here it is. It was on the 6th page. So now what we need to do is to download it. So if I'm going to zoom in on this section, and if I hover over the cloud download, by default it's got to save to the current library. But if I go into this little box here and open it up, on the left hand side I can save it to a different library by scrolling through, or create a new library, but here's the one I want. On the right hand side you can download this to the computer. So this particular model is one of the free ones, and there's a load of free ones on Adobe Stock for you to play around with and test. So now, I zoom out, I'm going to save this to my desktop. So this is how to download one of the 3D models. So if you bring it into your library, you can load it straight from your library into Felix, but it hasn't downloaded it to your computer. Or not as far as I know anyway. So now this is download. I'm going to come out of there, and here we got my zip file on my desktop. Open that up, get rid of the zip file, and let's open this up, see what we've got going on in here. So I have a couple of different files in here, but there's only one that I'm really interested in, but I will tell you what these files are. So this one right here, the one that has got ends with OBJ, that's the actual 3D model. This one here is to do with where the materials are placed on it for certain programs that you would use. This one, .mdl, I'm not entirely sure. But if I open this one, here I have my textures, the ones that come with it. So I've got the base color. Actually, let's just open these up real quickly, take a look at these textures. What I've got is my cardboard texture. So that's the picture of the cardboard texture. Then this one is the cup. This is the normal map, so the details of that cardboard. And then this is the normal map of the lid. And why would you need a normal map of the lid? Well, even with plastic, you'll have some little bits of detail, little tiny scratches and things, and indentations in it. So that all adds to make it a little more realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this object. So this is the model, the coffee cup model, the OBJ file. And right click, open with, and I'm going to open this in Photoshop. And Photoshop has been doing 3D for quite some time. And it's got a very good interface for it. And there's lots of things that you can do with 3D. Okay, so here we go. It's going to open it, and I'll just change this to kind of like 1500 by 1500, just make that a little bit bigger. It doesn't really matter what size that is, just want to have a little bit bigger of a viewport, because I'm not going to use too much on this. Now when this is open, as you can see, I've got my 3D coffee cup there. And I've got a similar thing. I've got a ground plane here. Over to the left hand side, I've got a different camera angle. This is looking from the top down. And to orient around this, it's quite similar to Felix. I'm going to click on the screen, and once I clicked, now you can see I've got my orbital camera available to me now. So this is the, you need to make sure that you've got your move tool selected. And this opens up your 3D scene. You can still move around in your 3D scene without this. If I go to, let's see, here, you see this little dialog box that's come up here on the left hand side. Well, I can still move my my camera around, but in order to have my scene with the ground plane and all that kind of thing, I've got to have the move tool selected. But I'm not going to go into too much detail in Photoshop and the 3D in that right now. What I need to do is I need to get that texture into the right place. And the reason that I brought this model in here is because inside of Photoshop, I can really get that texture exactly where I want it. How do I do that? Okay, so over on my right hand side, I'm going to click on my 3D panel. If I don't have that open, then I can just go up to Window, and it's the very first one. Once that is open, I want to go to the material that is on the coffee cup. And remember, this is the same model as we had in Project Felix, so we've got these two sections. We have got the coffee with lid, the cup part, and the coffee with lid, the lid part. And with these opened up, just the same as in Felix, underneath it is the material for each one. So I want to take a look at the material that's on the coffee cup, the actual cup. So I'm going to double click this, and when I zoom back out in here, not in here, now I've got a information in my properties panel about this texture. You see I've got some quite similar information. I've got shine, reflection, roughness, bump, opacity, refraction, and normal. So these controls are almost the same as the ones that we have in Felix. So with that said, the actual main texture, the image texture, is this one here called diffuse. And to get inside that, what we need to do is to click and open this, and then click Edit Texture. And what this does is it brings a new window, and inside this we've got our texture. As you can see, this grid that's laid onto the texture, this is actually where it will place the different parts of that texture on the cup. So this bottom part will wrap around the outside of the cup, the top part wraps around the inside, this here is the lip, and then you've got the top and the bottom of the cup itself. How do I know that? Well, I have opened this before and checked out to see which ones go where. And first of all, I put an image on this top part and it didn't show up on the cup. Then I put it here and it showed up on the cup. So that's how I know. And that's pretty much the way to do it when you are doing your textures. So now I want to add the texture, the branding texture that Chris had made onto this. So I'm going to place this I'm going to place that cup texture on here. And remember I said that it was this bottom part was going to be the where it was, and I'm going to, it's pretty much lined up the way I want it, I think. So I'm going to test that out, and to do that I need to now that I've put the texture onto that, let me look in my layers panel. You see now I've got my background, and the background had this this grid on it, and this grid is just an overlay. It won't show up when you export this image. It's just showing you where the texture is being mapped or applied to the cup. Okay, so now if I click Command S, save, it's going to save that texture, and let's go and take a look at our cup. So now I go back to my cup and I see that now it's added it in the correct place. Let me take a look around the back. You see there, I'll just zoom in on this. You see I've got this little white line here. Well, that white line is because my texture isn't quite covering the whole of this map. So let me just go to transform, and I'm just going to extend this a little bit this way. So you see it's over the top of these lines, and then I'm going to extend it a little bit over the other way. Okay for that. Save it out again. Every time I make a change on this texture to see it on the actual 3D model, I've got to save it. Press save. And now I can see that that line's gone. I can see from here that that line's gone. So let me move around here. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so with that done, now that I know that this is in the correct place, I need to export that texture and so that I can use it in Felix. So let me take a look at the size that I have this. So I'm going to go to image size. And this is huge. It's 4096 by 4096, but that's okay. That's pretty cool. That will really do the trick. So export as JPEG, and we will call this new texture. Save that. Just check on my desktop, make sure it's there. Yes, it is. Okay, so now let's take a look at the difference between these two. This is the one I've just done, and you can see that here we go. We've got the rest of the cup has got the cardboard, and now this has got this texture added to this particular portion of it. But if I go to the next image, you can see now why that didn't work. Is it was stretching this texture over the entire outside of the cup here, inside of the cup here, top and bottom. So now that that's done correctly, now we can go ahead and open that and add it into Felix. So I'm going to shut down Photoshop because my computer's not really fast enough to run all of them at the same time. I'm going to check, see how much RAM memory I've got, free it up again. I like to do this just to give it a boost right before I get back into this memory intensive app. And now my coffee cup, I remember I saved this out, so I'm going to click to open that. And here's another tip that I found is it takes a while for it to load the scene up when you've saved something out. But wait until it has loaded it up fully, like it has now, before you resize it. Sometimes if you resize it before it's completely loaded up, it just freezes and the scene just doesn't load up. So I found it's best just to wait and then resize the window. Okay, so now we have got my coffee cup. We've got that old texture and we want to change it out. So go to the left-hand side to the scene panel, open the coffee cup lid part, not the lid part, sorry, the cup part. Go to the material and let's switch out that material. So open up the browse part, browse for that new texture. Here's the new texture, put that on and give it a second. Let me now rotate my cup around and boom, we see it, it's there. So fantastic, it's got it in the right place. I'm going to rotate the cup around so that I have got all of the logo showing. So pretty good, we're coming on pretty good there. Now what I want to do is, well, it'd be nice if that lid matched the color of the branding. So I've taken that color down and did that in Photoshop, figured out, and obviously there's tons of programs you could do, so figured out what the RGB values were of that. So now I'm going to go over here and type in the RGB values. Put those, here we go. So 122, 18, 27. Aha! Now I have my lid the same color as my cup. So we're definitely getting somewhere. Okay, what are we going to do next? Next, I'm going to take a look at my lighting. And I've noticed another thing here is when you save a file, the lighting gets attached back to the rotation with the camera. So I've loaded that file back up, and you see here, rotate with camera is checked. Now look at the actual image of the cup here once I turn this off. Yeah, not much happened. Okay, well, what it does is it seems to reactivate that lighting when you first load it up. When you uncheck rotate with camera, it seems to load that lighting back up. So I'm going to make a couple of changes to this lighting because I want to get this lighting looking pretty good. So this is a case of just changing it until it looks right in my scene here. And this is one of the really good things with Adobe Project Felix, is you get this feedback as you're changing the lighting, as you're changing the textures, you're getting this feedback. You saw in Photoshop, we had that coffee cup image, but it didn't look great. And you don't get a preview the same quality as this inside of Photoshop. So you really don't know what you're getting until you've rendered it out. So this is one of the really great things here with this. So let me just move this around. That looks pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, about there, that's good. And we're gonna rotate this, trying to get some of that light. All right. Okay, now I want a little bit more shine on this branding here. I want it to show up a little better. So I'm going to go back to my material on my coffee cup, and I'm going to adjust the roughness. You see, as I adjust this roughness, you see the reflections and the shine coming into that logo a little better. So I'm going to adjust this. That's pretty good. And I'm also going to add a little bit of metallicness to it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So you see now we're really getting a kind of a more realistic view in there. Now I want to do a bit of the same with this lid here while I'm at it. Don't want it to be quite as metallic because it's plastic, but I kind of want it to be a bit on the glossy side to make it look, get it those reflections. So as I alter the roughness and the metallic qualities of something, I can bring in more reflection, and reflection is one of the good ways to make something look like it's really there. And you see the reflection of this background image now in here. So that looks pretty good. Yeah. Take a look at my cup again. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'm going to go back to my scene and just alter the rotation of my light. Just see how it's going to affect now. Ah, yes. See that? Now, I like over on the left-hand side, I see that there's some quite bright lights in the background of this image. So I feel as if that might wrap around the edges of this cup. So if I can get the edges of the cup to have a bit of brightness. So see here and here, I've got a bit of that brightness. So I like the look of that. Yeah, that's got a nice shine as well. This nice shine going over the actual logo part. I think we're done with this now. Let's just quickly go over what we've done. We brought our background image in. We aligned our ground plane to it, and we had to do that manually this time. And once we've aligned it to it, we brought our mug in, and we found out that the texture that we had created, that was our brand texture from our theoretical customer, didn't fit right. So we found how to download the actual 3D model from Adobe Stock. And of course, if you hadn't downloaded this model from Adobe Stock, if you downloaded it from somewhere else, it would be pretty much the same way. You've got your OBJ, which is the kind of model that you want for Felix, and then you also have your materials. So we brought that into Photoshop, and we found out how to open up the correct material, then put our material on the material we wanted on the top of this cup in the place that we wanted it, and then brought it back into Felix, and then fine-tuned our lighting and the attributes of our textures so that we have a more realistic view of our cup. So I'm just seeing something. I just want to check this out. Yeah, as I'm seeing in my preview panel that with my light intensity the way it was, I wasn't really getting much shadow at all. And I would like a little bit of shadow. So I'm going to have to play around here. See if I can zoom into this and do the threshold in light intensity. So I am getting some shadow there. Up a little bit more. So I want to balance still having some shadows created, but at the same time have the shine on this cup looking good. Okay, that looks pretty good. Right, I'm going to go ahead and save this again, so just in case anything happens. And I think we're pretty good now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to render this out, and I'm going to render it out on medium settings. I find that with my quality of my computer, that is about the best one. If I rendered it higher than that, I would have to leave it overnight. So it takes about 30 to 40 minutes on medium settings. So I use that pretty much all the renders that I do currently. And I find that's really good. So we've got this saved, we've got it ready to go. And the good thing about this is, one, in Felix, I've got this instant feedback on what it looks like. So I've been able to fine tune things with this instant feedback inside my viewport. And two, I now have this 3D coffee cup with the branding on it. If they wanted me to do something else with this, have it from a different angle, have a bunch of these cups on the page, a different background photo, no problem now. I wouldn't have to worry about trying to take a photo of the mug at a different angle and then sticking the branding on it in Photoshop. This mug is good to go now. I'm going to render it out. We'll come back and take a look at it once it's rendered out. And then once we've got that rendered image, we'll take a look at what our next steps would be in this design workflow for this small project. And we're back with our now rendered coffee cup. And this is looking pretty good. Zoom in a little bit on that. And we've got some of the reflections still there. We've got some nice reflections going on. And still a bit of the texture around here on this coffee cup. Remember we talked about moving that 1 pixel up or 1 point up. We've got a nice little bit of shadow here. And although you can't really see it too much, there's some area shadow around here as well. I'm going to take a look now at the rendered file in Photoshop. Here on our desktop is our PSD. So let's take a look at this. Now I only rendered this out at its default, which is 1024 by 768, so it's not a huge file size. And also, when you take a look at your image mode, you'll notice that it's 32-bit. So that gives you a lot of play with your lighting balance in this. But you can obviously go ahead and change it back down to a 16-bit image. And that will give you the options to more of your filters and things that you have. Some of the things in Photoshop don't work with 32-bit, but if that's not the case, then that's fine. So on the Photoshop file, if I zoom in here, you'll see we've got 3 layers: a rendered image, our background image, and our background color. Okay, so if I turn off my background image, you see here that now I've just got the shadow, the cup and the shadow, and this is looking pretty good. And to show you that shadow's there, I'm going to put a mask on here, and then with my brush I'm going to go ahead and remove some of that. And I'm not sure how, depending on how well this is working in YouTube, but if you can, you can see that there has been some shadow there, because now that I'm masking this off, you can see that there's a pure white color underneath it. See if it makes a difference if I turn the background off. No. Okay, so we can see that there's the pure white behind it when I mask it off. And if I turn that mask off, we can see that shadow comes back. So that shadow is definitely there. Now that this is finished, I'm going to send this image over to Chris, and he is going to do the next part in creating the marketing and advertising out of this image that we now have rendered and ready for the next stage.